former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, Fox News contributor Joe Concha. Governor Huckabee, let me start with you on the issues of the day. And I'm looking at the polls, but I don't really want to put a lot of stock 236 days out of this election in polling today. Laura Trump was very clear that major changes are coming to the Republican Party. That would include legal ballot harvesting, encouraging conservatives, Republicans to vote early, vote by mail, so they're not down hundreds of thousands of votes. But more importantly, I think the message about law and order and safety and security and secure borders and energy independence and America's leadership role on the world stage are very important also.
Well, they're very important. Look at the big shift that has happened among non-white voters. This poll that you mentioned shows that in 2020, Joe Biden had a 50-point advantage, 50 points. It's now down to 12. Sean, that's the kind of thing that is cataclysmic in political terms. It's just a stunning reversal. Now, part of the reason for that is that a lot of people don't understand that some of the hardest working people in this country are Hispanics. And it's not just that they're hardworking and they're seeing their paychecks dry up because of inflation. And it means that every working family in this country, according to recent numbers, have $11,434 less than they did when Donald Trump was president because of inflation. So that's one hit. The second is they're working hard and they see people who didn't come across the border legally. They came illegally. They're committing crime. They're making it difficult for people to respect them as legal immigrants. And worst of all, they're watching these people get hotel rooms, 3 meals a day, $10,000 gift cards, and flying all over the country. People are sick of it. And what you said, it's common sense. And there's a whole lot more of common sense in this country than the Democrats think there is.
Joe Concha, you follow the media as closely as anybody, and it just, no matter what the issue, what the day, the subject always returns to the fact that they hate Trump. They want to believe everything awful about Donald Trump. There's zero objectivity. You know, as I said about fake Jake over at Fake News CNN, he claims that he's a journalist. He's full of it. He's not a journalist. He's a liberal talk show host that pretends to be a journalist. That would be the same at all these people that think they're journalists on MSNBC or CNN or ABC, NBC, CBS. Are they really objective journalists? Do they even exist except for our news division?
Journalism has morphed into activism at this point, Sean. And it would be better if just the Jake Tappers of the world and the Rachel Maddows and the Jen Psaki's of the world just owned it. Said, yes, we are rooting for the Democratic Party, for Joe Biden. We want him to win. We want Trump to lose. We want to demagogue Republicans who they put together the Lake and Riley Act. And somehow you have Joy Reid on MSNBC talking about how that's a bad thing if we start deporting or arresting people and keeping them behind bars when they commit crimes, whether they're violent crimes, whether they're other kinds of crimes. And all I know is now, when you look at the polling, if we go back to that for a second, I'm vexed. I mean, terribly vexed. I mean, I was told by the pom-pom brigade that we just talked about on other networks and in op-eds in the Washington Times and New York Post that last week's State of the Union address, that was supposed to reset the whole ball game, right? Was the beginning of the end for Trump, that Biden was feisty and he showed energy and had the passion of a sophomore on, you know, pixie sticks and jello shots on spring break. And now we're seeing Trump rising in the polls. And since the State of the Union, well, Biden has fallen back even further. So that tells you that, you know, old guy yelling and reading a teleprompter for an hour and doing a divisive speech by all polling shows that this was more divisive than a unity speech. It doesn't resonate well with voters. And it bears repeating again, in 7 swing states, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Joe Biden trails in all 7. Ohio and Florida, they're gone as far as being bellwether states. They are solid red. And Joe Biden isn't, you know, a Bordeaux. He's not going to get better with age as we get closer to the election, which is 230-something days away. And one has to believe that anytime he's outside of a teleprompter, outside anything that's remarks that are written for him, it's going to be clean up on aisle 1, 14, 19, and 27, as we've seen in the days since that State of the Union. I don't see how Democrats solve this at this point because there aren't going to be any more State of the Unions to at least try to prop them up outside
Governor
of the convention,
Huckabee,
of course.
Laura Trump was on the show last night talking about the president trying to campaign in, of all places, New York State. Now, I would like to see, nobody ever listens to me, Governor, so I just throw out my ideas that get they evaporate in thin air. But I would like to see President Trump go in the state of New Jersey. I'd like to see him go into predominantly African American, Hispanic American communities. I'd like for him to remind people that under his leadership, that he set record low unemployment in the African American community, the Hispanic American community, the Asian community, women, African American youth. All of these things that he has done and accomplished, and then ask, how's the Democratic Party's policies? How's law and order in your town or city? How are your schools for your kids doing? I think that might be an effective idea for him.
Sean, I just want to say, gee, I listen to you. I don't care what Joe does. I listen to you. But I do think you're right. I think
Call
President
Donald Trump
should
Mar-a-Lago. Ask him to listen. Go ahead.
No, I think it's a great idea. I think he should go. He ought to be the Captain Kirk of the 2024 race, that he goes where no man has gone before. That he goes to these places where people are hurting. Their jobs are not paying them enough to keep up with inflation, where the working class people are taking it on the chin. And the very people that sat and listened to Joe Biden's speech, quite frankly, when I was listening to that, having him yell at me so angrily for an hour, I was ready for someone to give me a phone call and try to sell me extended car warranties. I thought it would be more pleasant than listening to another minute of Joe Biden's divisive speech. I think he's got a great opportunity. I hope he listens to you.
You know, I'm beginning to see the Democratic Party has emerged as the party of the coastal and media elite class. And Republicans are becoming the party of working men and women in this country. They're people that really do make the country great. Governor Huckabee, thank you. Joe Concha, thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.